Something about those drums, something about drumming, something about so amazing. Feel that psychic bath. It's awesome. I hope those of you watching online at home can have a feeling of that energy. So is it a drumbeat of war and violence? Or is it a heartbeat of love and oneness? You could hear the drums talking, couldn't you? Couldn't you hear them talking to you? This is always the question when we hear the drumbeat. Is it a drumbeat of war and violence or a heartbeat of love and oneness? Not only what is the drum beating, but also how are we listening? How are we hearing it? It's always surprising to me to have a conversation about the science of mind and for people to be surprised to understand that the science of mind is fundamentally a mystical tradition. Mysticism is the experience, the recognition, the awareness of a reality that is a wholeness, a totality, a oneness. And it is a recognition that all life, all beings everywhere, that you and I are emanations of this ultimate reality in individualized forms. And that we can experience that. We can know it. And it is the ground of our being. Science of mind is in the history of a long tradition of mysticism. Every great world religion, every indigenous people have had a mystical side. And over the years, that has warred with science in the last 400 or 500 years. And yet science is beginning to teach us exactly the same thing in the quantum field. In the quantum field, there's a recognition that everything is connected to everything else. That there is fundamentally an underlying order and wholeness that is outpictured in physical reality, and we're a part of that. All beings everywhere, all life everywhere is a part of that. These two things, the mystical reality and the science that is beginning to join it, this informs our ability to act in the world. Which is why in the science of mind we so heavily teach responsibility. Our ability to respond to conditions and events in life and choose how we will see it and what we will manifest. And now the question is, what is our responsibility to the conditions and the events on the planet facing the human race? Every time we engage in this question, we're engaged in the question of the deep mystery of life. Are we connected? Does it matter? And what is the truth? We stand within the context of our science of mind teaching. We take this up, this ability to respond from the deep awareness of our connection and oneness, and our understanding that we can shape subconsciously held beliefs and reshape the very quantum field of reality itself. We take that from our teachings, the science of mind. Ernest Holmes, who wrote the book, The Science of Mind, was asked one day, well, how do you define this teaching? And this is how he answered it. The science of mind is a correlation of the revelations of religion, the laws of science, the practices of psychology, and the opinions of philosophy applied to human needs and the aspirations of humankind. Now, psychology was a nascent science when the science of mind was being written and new thought was being born. Ernest Holmes was very interested in psychology, and since then, new thought and the science of mind has been likened to Buddhism as a spiritual psychology. Many of our practices and awarenesses are about healing the limited beliefs and the false ideas, the false thoughts that we carry around in our subjective mind. So that's why the practices of psychology is in brackets, because I added that to Ernest Holmes' statement. But I want you to notice that this statement involves all the main branches that we as human beings use to try to understand the cosmos, the way it works, and our place in it. I also invite us to notice that it is applied both to the needs and the aspirations of humanity. Often in New Thought, we shy away from this notion that there are needs, and yet the human experience is not always a perfect reflection of the spiritual truth as we know it. And so we apply all that we learn to both the needs and the aspirations. And also notice that this application, we often think of it as very personal and individualized, how these things are applied to my life. And yet this definition of the science of mind is applied not only to the individual, but to humankind as a whole, to all of humanity. And so how will we take this up? How will we take this up? This is the sacred art, as we've said all month. And today I'm calling it spiritually motivated social engagement. Actually, the reason I'm calling it this is because CSL calls it this. Our organization, our international denomination, Centers for Spiritual Living, calls it spiritually motivated social engagement. I am the chair of that committee. And working with our spiritual leader, Dr. Ken Gordon, and 7 other members, we are exploring our responsibility to each other and our planet as it springs from the teachings of the science of mind, our roots in Christianity and Hinduism, and our common humanity. We've been reading a book, The Conscious Activist, and we've been talking about the art, the sacred art of social engagement. So today I want us to explore 8 practical steps to be a conscious activist. These 8 practical steps, some of you will recognize many of them, and you'll go, yeah, I'm doing that. Yeah, I'm doing that. Yeah, that. But I'm hoping that there's 1 or 2 that will support you, sustain you, inspire you, or perhaps it's just the one that you need so that you can move in the world from a more grounded, spiritually centered position, and that our engagement, our social engagement, is deeply rooted in our teachings. 8 practical steps to take up being a conscious activist. So the first one is envision the outcome. Isn't this fundamental to our teaching? Envision the outcome. Focus on the end result. Where are we going? What does it look like? How do we imagine it? How might we imagine it experiencing it? This allows us to be for things. We are for this outcome, these outcomes that we envision. We speak about it in our global vision. And we let it pull us forward. Pulls us collectively forward, and it pulls us individually forward. So my story begins, I think I was, 13 or 14 years old. And I thought, man, someday I'm going to have a rainbow family. I'm going to adopt kids from all over the world, all over the United States. I'm going to give them an opportunity to grow up together. All you have to do is look at our Joy Village, and you see that I'm living my vision, growing a rainbow family. But when I was 15 or 16, I started to look around at the world. The most shocking image for me was the burning of Lake Erie. How a lake can burn is unfathomable to me. And I remember at that time making a decision that I would never have a child. I would never bring a child into the world in the form that we were experiencing it. I could not imagine inflicting upon my child the devastation that we were wreaking on our planet. And so I decided to get involved. I decided to pay attention and to learn about what I could do. And so the planet became my first overarching, overriding interest, because I realized, if we don't have a planet, if we don't have a home to live in, none of the rest of it matters. And I began envisioning and imagining if I were ever to have a child, and that child would have children, and they would have grandchildren, could I look them in the eye and say, I cared about it, what you were going to inherit from me. So, as many of you know, I'm super green. I know it's a little annoying, but there you go. At home and at CSLDallas, I make you wash the dishes. We use all the real plates and cups and things like that. We're actually going to do away with all the paper cups everywhere that you see and all the plastic lids. Please bring your closed containers for coffee and water. All that stuff goes in the landfill, or worse, ends up in our oceans. And every single day, Karen and I have to decide. Every day, we have to decide. Is this thing we're going to do, or this thing that we forgot to do, or this thing we need to do, are we going to do what's convenient? Oh man, I forgot my bags at home. Oh, it's all right, this one time I'll get plastic bags. It's more convenient, I'm in a hurry. Are we going to do what's convenient, or are we going to do what's in integrity with our values and our spiritual belief of our interconnectedness with all life? Every day, I'm confronted. And let me tell you, it is inconvenient. After taking deep steps in my own life to care about the planet, to be part of the environmental movement, I remember in 1989, I was with my mother, actually. We were having an extraordinary moment when the Berlin Wall came down. My mother, as you know, was born and raised in Germany, lived through the World War II, immigrated to the United States. And she said, never in my lifetime could I have imagined that that would happen. Never in my lifetime could I have imagined that. And as I held her in my arms, and she was crying about that, I said, but I could. In 1984, our community in Renton, Washington, of which I was the senior minister, we got very involved in the peace movement. In 1986, I believe it was, we were part of the very first world peace meditation that happened in Seattle. It was 4 a.m. in the morning on New Year's Eve. And we managed to have 8,000 people in the Kingdom praying with hundreds of thousands of people across the planet, meditating and praying for peace. We were picketed by the Christians. Got us on the front page news the next day. I thought that was pretty good. Because we couldn't make the news before that. Something worth thinking about. Peace doesn't make the news. And finally, and so then when we got here, for 10 years here, we've been very involved in the Season for Peace and Nonviolence here at CSLDallas and in Dallas as a whole, and we're bringing it back again in 2018 because it seems so important to live the practices that teach us how to be grounded spiritually and how to move in the world from that place. And do you see, it joins with me in a vision for this awakened humanity. And we have joined together with hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of organizations, hundreds of thousands of people in our statement when we say we envision an awakened humanity. And every time I'm confronted with something in the news that doesn't look peaceful, I say to myself, this is not what I envision. We are better than this. We are better than this. I know the truth of human beings. I know who we are. I know where we came from. And so I've learned in my ministry about people. How to love all of our funny bunnies. Right? Isn't that what we all are? Each one of us precious and unique and funny bunny in our own way. With whatever it is that is our little quirks, or our woundedness, or our fears. And so I got involved with people, standing with and for people, seeing the best in them, standing for the best for each person, just as I want that best for myself. To celebrate each person's uniqueness and value, to honor people's needs for a sense of belonging. All of that developed over time, moving from one heart tug to another. And so the second thing, the second practical step is that we can't do it all at once. We have to focus like a laser, one thing at a time, to pay attention, to trust that others are doing their part in whatever areas and aspects we simply can't take on because we can't, each one of us can't be responsible for it all. It's exactly what we teach in our spiritual mind treatments, in our affirmative prayer, right? You know, in foundations, we teach no shotgun prayers. I'm going to lose weight, fix my job, fix my relationship, and have lots of money. Thank you, God. Right? We don't do this. We teach that in prayer, we're going to have that end result in mind. We laser down into it. We do that treatment, that prayer, and we absolutely declare that that is the outcome. And we stay with it until it demonstrates. And in the same fashion, we have to focus like a laser on that thing which is ours to be a part of. And then we trust the butterfly effect. We trust it. That changing one thing changes everything. Remember that piece about quantum science? They call it spooky entanglement. You just love that? Such a scientific term. Spooky entanglement. Everything is connected to everything else. And everything that we do, that one thing that we choose to do, to speak, to say, to whatever it is, that one thing changes everything. So the third piece of spiritual, this practical step is to treat and move your feet. We hold the vision, we do our spiritual mind treatment, we focus in on it, and then we move our feet. Sinatra calls this the doobie-doobie-doobie-doo spiritual principle. I had to get my other book right here. So I want to read to you a little bit of the introduction of a book that we're using in a class that I've created. This is a book by Evelyn Underhill, and she is considered the premier authority on mysticism. And she has a book that she wrote called Practical Mysticism, and she was prepared to publish it on the eve of the United States getting involved in the Second World War. She almost didn't publish it. And then this is a portion of what she writes in her preface. It seems as though the dreams of a spiritual renaissance, which promised so fairly but a little time ago, have perished in the sudden explosion of brute force. Mysticism is that deep conviction of the dependence of all human worth upon eternal values, the immanence of the divine spirit within the human soul, which lies at the root of a mystical concept of life. And it can be hard, indeed, to reconcile with much of human history now being poured red hot from the cauldron of war and violence. Mysticism does not wrap its initiates in a selfish and otherworldly calm, or isolate them from the pain and effort of the common life. Rather, it gives them renewed vitality, administering to the human spirit, not, as some suppose, a soothing draught, but rather a powerful stimulant. Stayed upon eternal realities, that spirit will be far better able to endure and profit by the stern discipline which humanity is now called to undergo than those who are wholly at the mercy of events. Better able to discern the real from illusory issues and to pronounce judgment on the new problems and difficulties. It becomes a part of true patriotism to keep the spiritual life, both of the individual citizen and of the social group, active and vigorous. It is therefore the function of a practical mysticism to increase, not diminish, the total efficiency, the wisdom, and the steadfastness of those who try to practice it. It will educate them in a charity free from all taint of sentimentalism. It will confer on them an unconquerable hope. To allow our spiritual values, our spiritual practices, our spiritual teachings to inform and undergird the way in which we show up, what we pay attention to, and what we work to create. She calls practical mysticism. And so, the fourth thing is that we get to decide, to choose, and to act. This is fundamental to our teaching of taking personal responsibility, to stop blaming other people, blaming the situations, blaming things that we think can't be changed, but to take responsibility for our part. Many years ago, I had a sharing from a community member. She realized that something she knew that was wrong and was having a highly negative impact on a group of people. She knew this when she was a teenager. This is not right. 40 years later, it came out. This was not right. And she wondered, why for those 40 years did she not say anything? When she knew all along that it wasn't right. How do we take responsibility for the way in which we show up, what we speak about, how we do it? We pay attention to our decisions, our choices, and our actions. In our Conscious Activist, oh man, if you're not reading this book, I can't recommend it enough. He talks about all our favorite people, Lynn Twist, Lynn McTaggart, Brian Swim, Gene Houston. I mean, it's weaving it together with neuroscience and quantum physics. And he talks at one point about mirror neurons. This is one of the things that comes up in neuroscience that declares that we are hardwired for empathy and altruism because we have mirror neurons in our brain. And in The Conscious Activist, he says this: the work of the contemporary activist is to restore healthy, communicative environments where people really listen to each other. Dialogue has become a tool of conscious activism, modeling compassionate listening and nonviolent communication. And as you know, we have a new dialogue circle starting again that you're going to hear about. You're welcome to join. those who do peace building and conflict resolution work so careful to model and embody peaceful behaviors. Because each one of us is actually depth reading anyone we come into contact with, as if that person was ourselves. Heart science demonstrates that when we fill our hearts with feelings of love and appreciation for others, we radiate peace in the heart-brain connection. And when you have brought this degree of peace to your own body, you are not only less likely to be triggered in conflict situations, you become a peaceful mirror for others. Do you see? Rather than mirroring our mirror neurons, mirroring the swirl, we are so centered in peace and truth that others mirror us. We actually use this as the way in which we decide and choose to act, to take responsibility for how we show up. And do you see, because we understand from our mystical teaching and from the quantum field and the butterfly effect that when I do this, when each one of us does this in every place where we possibly can, that one thing affects everything. That one person who responds mirrors peace as opposed to continued escalation. That changes everything. Now, number 5, practical step, is to pay attention to what is working, right? We teach this. If you want to grow something in your life, you have to pay attention to where it's already existing, where it's already working. We teach this over and over and over again. That which you pay attention to grows. Pay attention to with your complaints and with all the negativity of all the things that aren't working in your life. Guess what's growing? Well, this is no different. We have to pay attention to what is working. Now, besides the fact that my relationship is working, about which I'm extraordinarily pleased, I also want to make a huge shout out, first of all, to this community for its love and support, but second of all, to Dallas, Addison, and Farmers Branch Police Department. Because do you know that while we were preparing for our wedding, legislation was being passed to discriminate against us, against the LGBT community? It was said that you could decide not to do business with us. And yet, let me tell you, every single vendor, flower arranger, cake baker, DJ, and decorator that we talked to, up to and including the Farmers Branch Police Department. And we said, we'd love for you to be a part of what we're doing here. We're a same-sex couple. Every person, to a person, said yes, absolutely. We'd love to be involved. We think that's great. Everybody we interviewed, not one moment of discomfort, shutdown, or negativity. Pay attention to what is working, because let me tell you, it is not in the news. And you see, this is what love looks like. This is what inclusivity and diversity looks like. This is what it looks like to respect and care and authentically work to create a world that works for everyone. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. So look for it, speak about it, share it, acknowledge it, light up. And you know, sometimes we have a little bit of a challenge because we think if we're lifting someone up, that means we're putting someone else down, which is complete nonsense. Okay? If we're lifting someone up, we're lifting it as an example and as a shining light and as an inspiration. It has nothing to do with anybody else. Let us look for what is working. Pay attention to it so that it grows. Now, the next piece, number 6, is coupled with this number 5 practical step. Number 6 is direct quote from Ernest Holmes, "The science of mind, stare a fact in the face and deny its spiritual truth." We do not put our head in the sand. We do not pretend that something isn't happening. We deny its spiritual truth. This is not how people should be treated. We are better than this. So I have 2 examples from my son. The first one is, he was a fireman, right? You got to see him on the wedding in his dress blues. He was all with his little hat on. He was so cute. Oh, my God. Okay, well, I thought he was cute anyway. But what do I know? I'm his mom. Okay, so I want to tell you 2 stories about Jason. The first one is that he works in a fire department south of the DFW Metroplex in a borderline small town rural community. And every once in a while he says to me, kind of in casual conversation, he kind of tosses it off somehow in the middle of a conversation we're having. "Oh, yeah, somebody brought something up about being gay in the department," and I said, "You can't do that around me. Right? You know that I won't stand for that kind of thing. So either you have to leave the room or I will." My son does that because he loves his mother. What a gift. Thank you. But do you see that we understand that we're all connected? We're all part of the whole? Every person you look at, every single one is a part of our family. A mother, a brother, a sister, a father, a son, related in some way, because we are all connected. Jason does call me up deliberately, usually when he's had a particularly hard call. Often that means somebody has died in his arms, or he's had to deal with a particularly hard wreck. He called me the other day about an 11-year-old girl. And the very first thing he said was, "And she was okay. I want you to know she was okay." Because sometimes I'm like, does the story have a happy ending? Usually it doesn't. This one does. It's good. 11-year-old foster girl in a foster home. She'd slipped down the stairs. She wasn't really all that hurt. But because something had happened that had triggered traumatized response in her, she wouldn't let anybody touch her. So they called 911. And here these 3 or 4 guys come in their uniforms. "What's the matter?" And they look her over and, they take her into the back of the ambulance to check her out. And he said, "I've never seen so much fear in the eyes of an 11-year-old. No one should live that way." And he said we had to strap her down and sedate her. And he knew that clearly this was not the first time she'd had this experience, because that fear was so present for her. And he said, it made me think how blessed I am in my own life, my own childhood, my own growing up. Oh, yeah, we thought we were so cool, and we sagged our pants, and we did all this stuff, and whatever. But I was never afraid like that. Never. His heart exploded open. It's not how we behave towards each other. That is not the spiritual truth of humanity. That is not the way any person should be treated, ever. stare a fact in the face and deny its spiritual truth. This is not who we are. We are better than this because we know that we are spiritual beings and we are all connected. To be in that place, number 7, we have to heal ourselves. We have to heal ourselves so that we can go and be love in the world. This means we have to heal our limiting beliefs. Oh, things like, well, that's just the way it is. Well, it really isn't that bad. It's not really that way. Nothing can be done. It's someone else's fault. They're doing it to me. I can't do anything about it. These are all the limiting beliefs that we get to confront. Aren't they exactly the same limiting beliefs that we have in our own personal lives? That we have to confront all the ways that we limit ourselves, all the ways that we think it's not possible. But there is other healing that we have to do as well. It's extraordinary to me how violent we are to our leaders, how much disparagement we can have towards other people who don't care about the same things we care about. In The Conscious Activist, he quotes Thomas Merton, a Christian mystic, 20th century Christian mystic. And he says this: Thomas Merton stated the problem succinctly. There is a pervasive form of contemporary violence to which the idealist most easily succumb: activism and overwork. The rush and pressure to modern life are a form, perhaps the most common form of its innate violence. To allow oneself to be carried away by the multitude of conflicting concerns, to surrender to too many demands, to commit oneself to too many projects, to want to help everyone in everything is to succumb to violence. It destroys the fruitfulness of one's own work because it kills the root of inner wisdom which makes work fruitful. Go be love in the world. But to go be love in the world, we actually have to be love ourselves. We actually have to be in that peaceful state. We actually have to be connected to the whole. We have to do our spiritual practice, do our spiritual work, return to our center over and over and over again. And we have to heal our own woundedness, our own taking it personally, our own drama. We have to heal those things which cause reactionary responses and result in overreaction, over-engagement, and over-commitment. And we have to be kind to each other. You know, I have to tell you that 2 weeks before our wedding, I actually called my prayer partner and I said, you need to pray for me. I need to know that it's okay that I spend these 2 weeks on my wedding and not on what's going on in the world. I don't think I'm alone in that. And we can't give from an empty well. We can't be centered if we're not doing our spiritual work. It is not about the quantity of work or the quantity of things that you commit to. Remember, step number 2, focus like a laser. Number 8, finally, when gratitude becomes an essential foundation in our lives, miracles start to appear everywhere. Over and over again to look for things to be grateful for. Oh, I'm going to need a Kleenex. Can I have a Kleenex, please? I needed a Kleenex at the first service. Holy moly. Thank you. Gratitude. Little and big stuff. Little and big stuff. To see it when people support other people, when across lines of race and job and socioeconomic barriers or whatever it is, we see people standing with each other. to see the vendors who all said yes to us, to big stuff, little stuff, individual stuff around the world, individual people who are making massive contributions, or small acts of kindness. Literally all over. To be grateful for these things, not just to pay attention and speak about it, but to experience that attitude of gratitude. Literally, there are hundreds of thousands of groups all over the world working at all levels towards humanity's awakening. Sustainability on our planet, and inclusion and respect for all people. Unfortunately, our media only hypes the craziness. You don't see them, but they're there. And you can find them. And you can be engaged with whatever calls to your heart, wherever your one thing is. And then be grateful for all the other people who are carrying the rest of the load, because we're all one and we're all in it together. And everybody is carrying their piece. Be grateful for your ability to understand and use the law for good, to know that you can set a new law in motion, a new cause in motion, not only in your own life, but in the world, for manifesting something good. Be grateful for every action you can and do take, no matter how small. Jean Houston, Barbara Marx Hubbard, some of the people that have been talking about this, Buckminster Fuller, for many, many, many decades. And Jean Houston says, to awaken humanity, or each time humanity has awakened, it has taken a leap of consciousness. And she says, it's jump time. It's jump time. Just like in our own lives, sometimes we have to hit rock bottom before we change how we behave, what we're addicted to, what we do. It's jump time. We are approaching the bottom. And it is an opportunity for a leap in consciousness to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence, which can only result in creating a world that works for everyone. And so, our 8 practical steps. I'm sure some of these you are already doing. But just listen for the one that goes, I needed to remember that. To envision the outcome. To focus like a laser. To treat and move your feet. To pay attention to what is working. To decide, to choose, to act. To pay attention to what is working. To stare a fact in the face and deny its spiritual truth. To heal ourselves. And to live from an attitude of gratitude. So how are we going to take it up? Each and every one of us is going to take it up in our own unique, precious, funny bunny way. But take it up. We will. And we must. I want to close with the very last story that's in this book, The Conscious Activist. And so I just invite you to go within with me. I just invite you to listen. James O'Day, he writes this. My mother died when I was in my late 40s. I never really experienced any separation in her death. And when I shared the news with a friend and a spiritual mentor, he responded by saying this. Well, now she is part of the mother of us all. She is the air you breathe. She is the ground you walk upon. And I knew this was right. Everything that is local also has a universal dimension. What I discovered as I grew older was that I never lost that aching to see my mother return safe and happy. It merely transformed into a more mature longing for lasting peace in the human family and a deep longing to the end of violence. There are times when I tap into the field of human ignorance that is light choking. It is a field that holds the patterns of dense greed and distraction. It is a field of self-devouring narcissism and betrayed ideals. It is a field that has lost its mother. It is a field that pushes aside the mother in us all. So now is our time to call her back. But make no mistake, we must call her by her true name. She whose moral beauty can never be seduced by self-interest. She whose fierce truth annihilates soul-suffocating deceit. She who stands in her power to resolve every contamination with ceaseless compassion. She whose fearless grace ignites the conscious spiritual activism needed in the birth and ascendance of a new humanity. Even now, as we shatter and fragment into particles of greed, even as we choke the life forest and stream, in air and ocean, even as we drive her from our hearts, we must know that this is not the end of the story. For even in the midst of all of this, our common mother is giving birth. She's giving birth to a culture of peace seated in hearts of compassion and whole system collaboration. She is taking shape as a conscious parenting movement that nurtures soulful intelligence in children. She's emerging in holistic education and health. She is reaching deep into the heart of human reconciliation with restorative justice. She is teaching the science and cosmology of oneness. She is proving the wisdom of diversity, and as the mother of all life, she is teaching us the true science of sustainability. Yet we must consciously call her in, call with a commitment to be her spirit in action. So call now from the deepest part of your longing. For in the great mystery, you are both mother and father to the solar child of your own awakening. Awake and witness so many divine sparks of healing and justice. How many have been already ignited in the heart of this new humanity? And so it is.